Data collection. Data collection in quantitative research is like qualitative research, any type of research is very important and critical. But as we discussed last week, in quantitative research, we work with the numerical variable, numerical data, and we collect number. So we measure different concepts. We measure different concepts in quantitative research with different ways. Last week we discussed measurement in detail, formative, reflective, and different types of measurement. And the measurement is very critical in quantitative research. So data collection is about measurement. So we collect data, we collect measurable data. So we collect number in quantitative research. In this Sanders onion, data collection referred to last layer of this Sanders onion. So before that, we need to identify quantitative research. We need to identify, especially based on this latest version, 2016, we have to identify research strategy, survey or panel data or experiment. This is different types of strategy that can be applied in quantitative research. Experiment, we do some experiment and collect data. Panel data, actually we use secondary data. We use some previous data that are collected by some organization, national organization or international organization. And just we use this data for our research. So our research, our strategy is panel data. But sometimes we need to collect primary data. So our strategy is survey. So this is three main strategies for quantitative research. But the most common strategy when we work with primary data is the common strategy is survey. And the common tool to collect data is questionnaire. So in this layer, in fourth layer, we have to identify our strategy. What type of strategy is suitable for our research? And then we manage and we conduct data collection based on this strategy. And also in before data collection, we need to identify time horizon. What's time horizon? Time horizon, we need to identify what type of data we need to address our objective. If we need to collect data in a short period of time, in same time, for different variables, right? So our data is cross-sectional data. And our time horizon and our data is cross-sectional data. But if we need to collect data in different years, for example, different years, especially for panel data. For panel data and secondary data, using data in different years is meaningful. You want to evaluate, you want to assess trend of employment in some companies. You want to assess performance of company for 20 years, right? So you need data for 20 years. You want to see the trend of employment in Malaysia for 20 years. So you need data for 20 years. This type of data and this type of actually time horizon for this research is longitudinal studies, right? Longitudinal studies. In longitudinal studies, we collect data and we use data for long period of time. But for cross-sectional study, that most of time is suitable for primary data and survey strategy, we collect data in short period of time. For example, we want to see the influencing factors on behavioral intention. We want to see influencing factor on intention to purchase some product, right? So we need to collect data at the same time for all variables, short period of time. So we collect data from customers about some factors like subjective norm, attitude, and perceived control based on theory of planned behavior, and intention to purchase this product. So we collect data in cross-sectional way, right? So for this type of research, we don't use longitudinal data, right? Okay. When we go for data collection, so we have two main data categories in quantitative research: secondary data and primary data, as I explained. Secondary data is something that already created, already collected by international organization. Here I have two sets of data by UNWTO, World Tourism Organization, and World Bank. So in these organizations, you can find many secondary data from different countries, right? Okay, let me show you something. Okay. For example, here I have the data from the World Bank for Malaysia, right? So the World Bank, for many indicators, thousands of indicators, you can find data for different years, yearly based data. So you, for example, GDP of Malaysia and population and school enrollment, CO2 emissions, poverty headcounts, life expectancy, different variables, different indicators. So if your research is something about something that you need this type of secondary data, so no need to collect new data. It's not possible to collect data, right? You have to use this type of data, this type of secondary data for your research, right? For example, here is another example. This is UNWTO website. So in UNWTO, you can see tourism statistics. And in tourism statistics, you access to data from different countries. For example, we want to see data for Malaysia. Okay, so we want to see data for Malaysia for different indicators. Basic indicators, arrival of non-resident tourists, outbound tourism. For example, if you click on this one, okay, here you have access to Excel file, PDF file, and some description. If you click on Excel file, you can download Excel file for this data for the period of 2014 to 2018, right? So you have access to this type of data and you can use this secondary data for your research. But if your objective, if your research objective need to use secondary data, and work with secondary data. But if you need to collect primary data, the most common tool for primary data is questionnaire. Most of you probably use the questionnaire and want to collect secondary data. Different disciplines like psychology, education, sociology, business, different department and disciplines under business. These social science disciplines, most of time we use primary data using questionnaire. So this is very common type of collecting data in social science disciplines. Okay, so if you want to collect data using questionnaire, what's the questionnaire? Questionnaire, of course, you know, is a written set of questions that are given to people in order to collect fact and opinion and collect some information about some variables, right? So questionnaire is something that we designed to collect primary data. Here I actually explain some disadvantage and advantages of questionnaire. But actually these advantages and disadvantages of using questionnaire is from two different perspectives. If you look at advantages of questionnaire is from positivist and realist perspective. So the people that are interested to do quantitative research. If you look at disadvantages of questionnaire, you can see these critics and disadvantages from interpretivist perspective. So these advantages and disadvantages are from two different perspectives. Okay, but here you can see questionnaire is practical, large amount of information can be collected, can be carried out by researcher or by any number of people. So any number of people can help you to collect data. No need to researcher be involved in collecting data. You can hire somebody to collect data for you. The result of questionnaire can usually be quickly and easily quantified. So you can see, okay, this one can be analyzed more scientifically. So this is from realist or and positivist perspective. We use quantitative, so we believe is in more scientifically. But interpretivist, based on their perception and based on their epistemology, they say, okay, collecting data and doing research under quantitative research and collecting quantitative data is not valid and scientific. Right? So this is from different perspectives. Different types of knowledge, different types of research has always have some advantages and disadvantages. And we need to pick up suitable research method and tool based on our research objective, what we want to do. Okay? And the most important thing is to justify why quantitative research is suitable for my study, for my objective, and why questionnaire is the most suitable tool to collect data. Why I don't collect, why I don't use secondary data, right? So we need to justify, but always there are some advantages and disadvantages from different perspectives. If you look at disadvantages, okay, you can see there is no way to tell how trustful a respondent is being. But in quantitative research, we don't believe on this one. We say based on the method that we apply, we can confirm robustness of our method, our approach, our data collection. So method should be robust, right? So we can check trustfulness of our data, right? Trustworthiness of our data. So this is from other perspective. But it's good to review that somebody mentioned these disadvantages for questionnaire. And actually, we need to be very careful about this one. For example, here when we say lacks of validity, okay, lacks of validity here mentioned as a disadvantage of questionnaire. But actually, validity is one important part of quantitative research. When we collect data using questionnaire, we have to check validity. We have to check external validity. We have to check content validity. We have to check face validity. We have to check convergent and discriminant validity. So we check different types of validity to make sure about validity of our data, validity of our research and result, right? So here say lacks of validity. This is a sign for us that validity is very important. And when we use questionnaire, we need to make sure about validity of our questionnaire, validity of our instrument, and validity of our data, right? Okay, when we apply questionnaire, there are different ways to collect data based on questionnaire. Some of the methods are self-administered data collection method using questionnaire. When we deliver and collect questionnaire, when we distribute a questionnaire and then go to collect after 1 day, or after a few hours, or after a few minutes, right? Sometimes we post our questionnaire, and actually we use internet to distribute and collect. We send email, or we use some online platform. So all these types of distributing and collecting data using questionnaire called self-administration. But because all respondent is responsible to answer to question and send to us, we don't interfere to collect data, the research. Just we send, just we distribute. But another type is interviewer administered. Interviewer administered, actually we complete, the researcher completes the questionnaire. So we ask questions from respondent and we complete questionnaire. A structured interview, but actually this interview refers to completing questionnaire. As I explained before to answer your friend's question, this structured interview means we interview questionnaire. We ask question inside questionnaire and we actually put answer of respondent in questionnaire, right? Another one, telephone questionnaire. We give a call to other person and ask question and complete question. So these two main types of distributing and collecting questionnaire refer to who is completing, who is answering to questionnaire. If respondent answer, okay, self-administered. If we answer, ask, and we complete, is interviewer administered. There are different types of e-survey. You may be familiar with this different platform. Google survey, you can create your questionnaire in Google. You can use SurveyMonkey. You can use Sorgo survey. Different university around the world has different platform. One of the famous platform in Western countries is Quadratic, a platform that many of the Western university use this Quadratic platform. But most of these platforms are not free. And if you want to use for professional work, you need to pay. For example, for SurveyMonkey, as I know, if I'm not mistaken, for SurveyMonkey, for basic survey, you can use SurveyMonkey. But if you want to do your research and you need to develop a complex questionnaire and professional work, you need to pay for SurveyMonkey. And other platforms also, some of are free and some you need to pay for them. But Google is a free platform and very good platform to create questionnaire and distribute and collect data. Okay, for developing questionnaire, actually always we need to consider these three aspects. We need to increase trust and decrease cost and maximize response rate, maximize number of response that we can get and number of completed questionnaire that we can collect. So we need to design questionnaire that considering these aspects, increase trust, decrease cost, and increase the response rate based on wording, questions, and structure of question. Actually, there are three main types of designing questionnaire. Sometimes we adopt questions and items to develop questionnaire. Sometimes we adapt, and sometimes we design by own. And so we develop own questionnaire or own questionnaire. The last one is least valid, right? So in research, especially in PhD or when we are doing some research that we want to publish in good journals, top tier journals, we have to avoid of designing our questionnaire. So this is not a preferred method for designing questionnaire, and you have to avoid it, right? Don't go for designing your questionnaire. But adopt and adapt are two ways, and many studies use these two methods. Adopt means you exactly use a questionnaire that developed and established and tested in previous studies. So questions and items are similar to previous studies. You are working in education, and previous studies investigate something about the loneliness and friendship of students, and the role of loneliness and friendship on performance of the student, right? So they develop a questionnaire to measure these variables. You want to exactly repeat this study in other contexts. You want, this study was done in a Western context, you want to do this study in Malaysia, right? So you use exactly same questionnaire to collect data. So you adopt item to measure each variable, and you adopt questionnaire because you don't change this questionnaire. But sometimes we use some questionnaire for other discipline, for other contexts. For example, in marketing, for consumer behavior for a product, researchers develop a questionnaire, right, to see intention to purchase this product and the factor influence on purchasing this product. But we want to use this questionnaire to other contexts. We want to use in tourism context, in hospitality context, and see intention of people to book dream hotel, right? So the context is totally different. So we need to change wording, and we need to do some modification in items based on new context. So in this case, we adapt this questionnaire, we adapt this item to our context. So we need to change and modify question, but still we use previous studies questionnaire, previous studies items and question to measure specific items, but we do some modification to suit our context, to fit to our context, right? So always prefer to use these two types. So don't develop your own questionnaire and adopt or adapt your questionnaire from previous studies.
Excuse me, Mustafa.
Yes.
I have a question. You mean that when we adapt the questionnaire, we maybe according to the context, we need to have some modifications. But who knows that the modification is appropriate? It is right.
You need to identify when you adapt questionnaire. You have to do pilot tests and pre-tests, and based on pilot tests and pre-tests, you can check their reliability and validity of your modification.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, doctor.
Yes.
I have another question. As you just now, you told us that the designing our own questionnaire is least of validity. Then how can we do like innovation in our studies? Who designed the first questionnaire in for example, if in tourism?
Innovation is not only an originality, is not only developing your questionnaire, right? Originality can be in different ways. You can combine different variables, you can combine different theories to develop new model. You can measure your construct, your variable in different ways. You can add some items from different studies. For example, for intention, some studies use 3 items, another studies use another 3 items. So you think these 6 items can be combined and give you more comprehensive measurement of intention. So you combine these two set of items together and create new measurement for this variable. So originality and novelty can be in very, very different ways.
Then that is to say,
of course, is not designing your questionnaire. Is not originality.
But in that case, it means that, for example, in business, for example, in satisfaction, then all the existing questionnaire are all from the same, like one one version.
No, you can find. Not just now I explained that you can find 3 items from one study and 3 items from another study, and you combine it. It doesn't mean that all items are repeated in all previous studies, right? Different studies apply different method to measure satisfaction. You need to see which one is suitable for your study. Sometimes combination of them, sometimes using one, sometimes using formative, sometimes using reflective. So it's based on your decision. But any item that you apply should be supported by literature. Right?
Thank you.
So this is measurement theory that I already discussed. Measurement theory. Addition to a structural theory, we need to make sure about measurement theory. Right?
Thank you.
Okay. There are some principles for question wording, but this is for rewording or modification. When we want to reword, it's not for own development of questionnaire, right? Always is good to use simple language and understandable language, especially when we translate original questionnaire. Original questionnaire is in English, but we need to transfer to Mandarin and want to conduct our research in China. So we need to use simple language when, especially we translate. Avoid jargon, keep questions short and specific, avoid the ambiguities, avoid the double-barreled question that ask about and or, so the respondent don't know, refer to first one or second one. When you ask, are you agree with this one and that one? So which one I should answer? Avoid double negative, avoid leading question. So there are some principles for modification and make your questionnaire simple, readable, and understandable for your respondent. So you need to consider this principle to design or modify your questionnaire. There are some recommendation for sequence of questions, but when you adopt your questionnaire, actually you follow the original study for sequence of questionnaire. But it's good to know the question should be from easy to difficult and general to a specific question. There are different scaling platform, scaling system for your questionnaire. Actually, when you ask some question and you include some item to measure variable, you need to understand the concept of item and question and see what type of scale is suitable for this question. We have many different types of scale: competency scale, frequency scale, extent scale, comparison scale, developmental. But the most common scale that many studies use is agreement scale. We provide a statement and ask respondent to say they agreement with this statement from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And we divide this based on Likert scale in 5 different scale, from strongly disagree to strongly agree, strongly disagree, agree, neutral, strongly disagree, disagree, neutral, agree, and strongly agree, or in 7 different scale or 9 scales. So the most common is agreement, but sometimes our study need to use different types of scale. For example, satisfaction scale, importance scale. Here you can see in a slide, I provided some examples for each scale to clarify this one. For example, this frequency scale. Okay, you want to measure Facebook usage during free time, right? So your question is about Facebook usage in free time. So you cannot use agreement scale, disagree or agree. So frequency scale should be suitable for this one. First one is less than 60% based on your study and based on your context. 60% plus, 70% plus, 80% or 90% plus. Or for example, you want to see number of visits, right? Number of visits to a country, to a destination. Okay, your answer will be 1 time, 2 to 2 times, or 2 to 3 times, 4 to 5 times. So you use this frequency scale to answer, respondent answer your question. So these scales should be based on nature of your question, what type of answer you expect and respondent should give. Extent, important. For example, you ask about policy and the importance of policy. Extremely important, important, moderately important, somehow important, and non-important. So you divide between 1 to 5. So this is importance scale. So scale is based on nature of your question. Let me skip from this part. To design questionnaire, actually most of questionnaire has main 3 parts. First part is introductory part of your question. And this introductory part, actually you have to provide information sheet. You know, information sheet in ethics and research ethics. In research ethics, when we want to start our research, when we want to collect data from somebody, from some respondent, we need to provide some information at the beginning of research. So you need to provide this information at the beginning of your questionnaire. What's the purpose of this research? actually for information sheet, we have in Sanders, if you go to Sanders' book and go to information sheet section, you can find very detailed information that we need to include this in introductory part, this introduction of our questionnaire. We need to explain about purpose of our research, who are doing this research. The result will be anonymous and confidential, and how we compile the result. And so you need to explain all these very briefly in introduction part of your questionnaire, and then provide contact information of somebody, researcher, that respondent can contact a researcher if they have any question about data, and if they have any question about your questionnaire. So this is the introduction part. Another part is demographic. Always we need to have a demographic part and refer to demographic characteristic or social demographic characteristic of respondent, like age, gender, income, and some basic information, demographic information that you need. And the third part, and the most important part of questionnaire, is body of your questionnaire. Body of your questionnaire includes all variables, independent and dependent variables. This part should be adopted from previous studies. If you have, for example, 10 variables to measure, right? So you have 10 different sections in body part of your questionnaire, and these 10 variables, these 10 different sections, you have to explain you adopted item for this part from which studies, right? From one study to a study or more. So you need to explain in methodology part, instruments development, clearly explain and cite where did you adopt these items to measure this specific variable, this specific construct. So this is body of your questionnaire. So your question includes 3 parts: introduction, demographic characteristic and data, and the body of your questionnaire including all variables, dependent and independent variable of your study. Okay. As I mentioned, pilot test, you have to do pilot test and pre-test when you adopt, especially even for when you adopt your questionnaire, because actually you use same questionnaire and same items, but you want to conduct your research in different contexts, right? So actually for this type of research also you need to do pilot test and pre-test. Pilot test and pre-test, in the literature, pre-test generally refer to some qualitative work. What does it mean? You interview with some expert. You interview with some expert to understand 2 things. First, to understand the reliability of your questionnaire and questions, and understandability of your questionnaire, right? You use same items, but you translate this item to conduct your research in other country. So you need to interview, you need to do interview with some expert to understand your translation are meaningful and readable and understandable for respondent, or you need to do some modification and rewording some part of your questionnaire, right? So pre-test, this is one part of pre-test, to check reliability and to check face validity. You remember in validity, we mentioned about different types of validity: face validity, content validity. Face validity, part of this pre-test. So you interview with expert to check validity of your questionnaire, questions and items to measure specific variable. You want to measure satisfaction and you adopt this item from some previous study, but you need to check when you translate to other context, you need to check wording of this question and these questions are suitable for measuring satisfaction or not, right? So for reliability and face validity, we need to conduct pre-test and interview with some experts to check these two criteria. Also, we need to do pilot tests. Pilot test is doing some quantitative data collection, but in very small scale. For example, if for your actual data collection, you need to collect 300, 400 respondent and data, but for sample size, almost 30 is enough for pilot test. But for based on this quantitative data and based on this pilot data, we can check reliability of our question. So we check reliability based on interview with expert and collecting data from some respondent, small scale, and check the reliability based on some criteria like Cron-Battus alpha or some other criteria to test reliability and internal consistency. So when we adopt or adapt our questionnaire, we need to run pre-test and pilot test. Interview with expert, so you need to report in methodology before data collection. This should be done before data collection, because in pilot test and pre-test, you may revise some part of your questionnaire, revert some questions, delete some items based on the result of pre-test and pilot test. It's possible that the expert that you interview say, this question is not suitable for this context, right? So you decide to delete this question. So you need to run pre-test and pilot test and report in methodology part before data collection. And then after pre-test and pilot test, you can finalize your questionnaire and be ready for actual data collection. So this is some benefits and some principles that we need to consider in pilot